Lydia liked her world the way she liked her jewellery. Precise, controlled, and flawless. Her apartment was glass and shadow, 40 floors above the city. Every object in it placed exactly where she wanted it. She designed necklaces and rings for people richer than sense, and she was very, very good at it. Because Lydia never let anything happen by accident. Chaos was for other people, for the careless, the weak, the ones who let life simply happen to them. She poured herself a glass of wine, surveyed her perfect, ordered world, and felt the deep, cold satisfaction of a woman in complete command of everything she touched. She had no idea that the small antique box waiting on her desk was about to take all of it away. The box had arrived that afternoon with no sender's name, only her address, written in an old-fashioned hand, and a note that said simply, "For the one who can't resist." Lydia should have found that unsettling. Instead, she found it intriguing. She was, after all, a connoisseur of beautiful things, and the box itself was exquisite. Dark old wood, worn smooth, lined inside with faded green velvet. She set down her wine and lifted the lid with careful fingers. Whatever was inside had been sent to her, specifically, by someone who knew exactly what she was. The one who can't resist. She almost smiled at how well they'd pegged her. And then she saw what lay nestled in the velvet, and her breath caught. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. A serpent, coiled in a perfect circle, wrought in emerald scales and antique gold, its tiny gem eyes catching the lamplight as if it were alive. As a designer, she could see at a glance that it was old, centuries old, and made by a master whose name was surely lost to time. She turned it over in her hands, and on the back of the clasp, she found a line of worn engraving in a language she didn't know, the letters half erased by 100 years of handling. A warning, perhaps. A maker's mark. Lydia didn't care which. She only knew that she had to wear it. That she'd never wanted anything so badly in her controlled, deliberate life. Just once, she let herself simply want. She fastened it at her throat before she could think better of it, and stood admiring herself in the mirror. It was perfect on her. The emerald caught the cool grey of her eyes, the gold warmed her pale skin, and the little serpent rested against her collarbone as if it had been made for her and her alone. For a moment, she simply gazed at her own reflection, vain and content. Then she felt the metal grow warm against her skin, pleasantly warm at first, like sunlight, then warmer, then hot, and the tiny gem eyes of the serpent flickered with a faint inner green light. Lydia's smile faltered. She reached up to unclasp it. Her fingers found the back of her neck, searching for the catch. There was no catch. There was no clasp at all. She clawed at it. She dug her elegant nails under the gold and pulled, but the necklace had no beginning and no end now. It had become a seamless ring of warm metal fused around her throat. And as she pulled, she felt it sink, the edges of it pressing into her skin, melting against her like wax against a flame, the green glow pulsing brighter with her rising panic. "No," she breathed, yanking harder. "No, no, come off!" This wasn't possible. Things didn't just happen to Lydia. She controlled them, ordered them, mastered them. But the necklace would not come off, and the heat of it was spreading now, sinking past her skin, sinking into her. And for the first time in her carefully ordered life, Lydia felt something take the controls out of her hands. The heat reached her eyes first. The whole room sharpened and shifted. Colours deepened. The dark corners of the apartment suddenly clear. The faint warmth of her own wine glass glowing softly across the room, as if she could see its heat. She stumbled to the mirror and froze. The cool grey eyes she had looked into every morning of her life were gone. In their place were 2 eyes of molten gold, and down the centre of each ran a long, narrow, vertical slit. The eyes of a snake, watching her from her own face. Lydia pressed a trembling hand to her cheek, her elegant composure cracking. "What is this?" she whispered. "What is happening to me?" But the golden eyes in the mirror only stared back, calm and patient and ancient. The way a serpent watches something it has all the time in the world to take. She tried to speak again, to call someone, anyone, and felt the next change happen inside her own mouth. Her tongue moved strangely against her teeth, thinning, lengthening, and when she pressed her hand to her lips, she felt the very tip of it split, dividing into 2 delicate points that flickered and tasted the air. A long, low hiss slipped out between her words, and she clapped a hand over her mouth in horror. When she breathed now, the air came alive with information, the scent of her own fear, the warmth of the heating vents, the faint metallic tang of the city far below. A snake's tongue, a snake's senses. She, who had built her entire identity on cool human control, was being unmade into something that ran on instinct and appetite, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Then the necklace, fused and glowing at the hollow of her throat, began to spread. Where its green light touched her skin, the skin changed, and Lydia watched in the mirror as the first emerald scales rose through it, tiny and perfect and edged in gold, blooming outward from the necklace in a slow, deliberate tide. They climbed her throat. They spread across her collarbone. Each one caught the light like a chip of jewel, and some distant, horrified part of her, the designer, the artist, recognized that they were exquisite, the most beautiful work she had ever seen, and that it was being done to her own body without her permission. She raised a shaking hand and touched them and felt the cool, smooth hardness of scales where soft skin had been. The serpent in the necklace was wearing her now, and it had only just begun. Panic took her then. The raw, animal panic of someone whose entire life has been about never being out of control, suddenly drowning in it. She lunged for her workbench and seized her finest jewellery pliers, the tools of her trade, and tried to pry the necklace from her own throat. The metal wouldn't budge. It had no edge, no seam, nothing to grip. She tried to scrape the scales from her skin, and they would not come, rooted now like part of her. "Stop it!" she snarled at her own reflection, at the box, at whoever had sent it. "Stop! I don't want this!" But wanting had nothing to do with it anymore, and neither did her will, or her cleverness, or her iron control. For the first time, Lydia was simply a thing that the world was happening to, and the helplessness of it was worse than any pain. She felt the next change as a deep ache in her gums, and when she opened her mouth to a small mirror, she saw them coming in. 2 of her upper teeth lengthening, curving, sharpening into long, delicate fangs, hollow and gleaming, made for delivering venom. The rest of her teeth sharpened to fine points behind them. She ran her new forked tongue along them and felt how perfectly deadly they were.
Lydia had spent years crafting tiny, precise, beautiful things with her hands, and now her own mouth had been refashioned into a precise, beautiful weapon she'd never asked for. She thought of the warning engraved on the clasp, the words she couldn't read, and understood at last that they had not been a maker's mark. They had been exactly what they looked like, a warning. And she had ignored it, the way she ignored everything that tried to tell her no. Her hands went next, the cruelest theft of all, for a woman who created beauty with them. She held them up before her golden eyes and watched her elegant fingers lengthen, the nails she kept so perfectly manicured, darkening and hardening and curving into delicate claws. Emerald scales swept up over the backs of her hands, over her knuckles, around her wrists, gloving her in living jewels. She flexed them slowly. They were beautiful and strange and capable, and they would never again do the fine, patient work she had built her whole self around. She thought of every necklace she had ever made, every ring, every tiny, perfect setting, all done with these hands, the hands that were now becoming a serpent's. A tear slipped down her cheek and traced the scales at her jaw. She wasn't a designer anymore. She was being redesigned.
The scales would not stop spreading. They swept up her arms and over her shoulders, crept down across her chest and her ribs and her back, until her body was sheathed in a flawless coat of emerald and gold, the necklace blazing like a green star at the center of it all. The cool, controlled woman of an hour ago was vanishing beneath living jewelry, scale by perfect scale. She wrapped her arms around herself and felt them, smooth and cool and right. And she hated how right they felt, hated the small, treacherous part of her that had stopped struggling and begun to simply belong to this. Outside the window, the city glittered, indifferent, 40 floors below. No one was coming. No one even knew. Whatever Lydia was becoming, she was becoming it alone, in the dark, in the most beautiful prison she had ever owned. Something was changing inside her now, deeper than skin. A cold was settling into her body, not the cold of fear, but a deep, structural chill, as though the warmth was draining out of her blood. And with it came a new and unfamiliar pull toward heat. She found herself drifting across the room to the warm glow of a lamp, drawn to it the way she'd once been drawn to a beautiful thing, reaching out to bask in its warmth without deciding to. Her racing human panic was quieting, cooling, slowing. And in the stillness beneath it, a serpent's patience was unfurling. She could feel the heat of living things. She could taste movement on the air. Some ancient, cold-blooded calm was rising up to fill the space where her frantic human fear had been. And the most frightening thing of all was how peaceful it felt to stop fighting and simply let it come. And then the change came for her legs, and Lydia understood that the worst was still ahead. She felt the scales sweep down past her hips, over her thighs, her knees, her calves, and as they spread, her legs began to draw together. She tried to pull them apart and couldn't. An irresistible pressure was binding them, knees pressing to knees, the muscle and bone beneath the scales beginning to merge into a single shape. She sank to the floor, scrabbling backward on her clawed hands, watching in horror as her two legs sealed against each other and the fine fabric of her trousers strained and split along the seams. She knew, with a cold, certain dread, exactly what was coming. There was no part of the serpent it had left her. It was going to take her legs, too, and leave her something else entirely in their place. Her fused legs began to lengthen. The single shape they'd become stretched out across the floor, scales rippling down its length in emerald and gold, growing longer and thicker and stronger than any pair of legs had ever been. A tail. A serpent's tail, sleek and powerful and beautiful, where Lydia's legs used to be. The last shreds of her trousers tore away as it grew, useless now, and the long coil of her new body settled heavy and cool against the floor. She reached back with a trembling, clawed hand and touched it, and felt the touch run all the way down its length. Hers. Every inch of it hers. She couldn't stand. She would never stand again. The woman who had walked through her perfect life in tailored trousers and high heels now ended in a sweep of jeweled serpent coils. And somewhere beneath the rising serpent calm, the last of the human Lydia let out a long When it was done, Lydia coiled in the center of her perfect apartment and tried to understand the body she now wore. From the waist up, she was still almost herself. The same sharp face, the same black hair, the same charcoal blouse straining now over a torso of emerald scales. But below that, she swept out into a long, magnificent serpent's tail, coil upon coil of jeweled muscle, ending in a tapering point that flicked restlessly against the floor. She braced herself upright on her clawed hands and looked down the length of herself, at the impossible, beautiful wrongness of it. Her clothes didn't fit a creature like this. Nothing fit a creature like this. She was a naga now, a serpent woman out of old myth and older nightmare. And the worst part, the part she could barely admit, was that some cold new instinct deep inside her had stopped calling it wrong and started calling it home.
The last change was the gentlest and the most intimate. A delicate tracery of scales spread up over her cheekbones, across her temples, along the line of her brow. Not enough to erase her face, but enough to transform it, refining her sharp human beauty into something colder and stranger, and undeniably not human. She lifted a clawed hand and touched her own cheek, and felt the smooth scales there, the faint ridge of them along her jaw. In the window's dark reflection, a serpent woman looked back at her. Black hair, golden slitted eyes, a beautiful scaled face, fangs just visible behind her lips. She was still recognizably Lydia, and she was utterly, irrevocably something else. The two truths sat side by side in the glass, impossible to reconcile, and she stared at them for a long, long time, trying to find the line where the woman ended and the serpent began, and slowly realizing there wasn't one anymore. She reached for her phone with a clawed hand. She had to call someone, had to hear a human voice, had to prove there was still a person in here. She managed to bring up a number, and when it connected, she opened her mouth to speak. "Help!" The word came out wrong, soft and sibilant, hissing at the edges around her fangs and her forked tongue. She tried again, forcing it. "Please, somebody! I need..." But the sentence frayed and dissolved, the consonants melting away, until all that was left was a long, low, helpless hiss that filled the quiet apartment. On the other end of the line, a confused voice asked who was there, then hung up. Lydia let the phone slip from her claws. There would be no calling for help. Her human voice was gone, sealed away behind a serpent's mouth. And with it went the last bridge back to the world she'd come from. At last, she lifted herself up on her coils and faced her own reflection in the great dark window. The whole of her, all at once. A serpent woman reared up against the glittering city. A beautiful scaled torso, black hair spilling over emerald shoulders, golden slitted eyes, and beloved it the long, magnificent sweep of a jeweled tail,
coiling and uncoiling with a will of its own. The little serpent necklace glowed softly at her throat, the source of it all, fused into her now forever. Lydia raised a trembling claw toward the glass, and the naga in the reflection raised one too. She searched that beautiful, terrible face for the woman she had been, the perfectionist, the controller, the one who never let anything simply happen, and found her only there, in the eyes, looking back in grief. "That's me," she thought, the words already going cold and distant. "That's still me. Isn't it? Isn't it?" She coiled in on herself in the dark and fought the last battle no one would ever see. Her human memories were still there, her name, her work, the cool pride she'd taken in her own control, the feel of fine tools in clever hands. But they were thinning now, growing faint and far away, like a signal fading out. And rising up beneath them was the serpent, patient, cold-blooded, certain. The pull toward warmth, the taste of movement on the air. A deep, ancient calm that felt less like losing herself and more like remembering something older than herself. "I'm still me," she told the dark, clinging to it with everything she had left. "I'm Lydia. I'm a person. I'm in control. I'm still..." But she was no longer certain which of the two minds inside her was doing the thinking. The frightened woman, or the calm and waiting snake. And then, somewhere in the long, dark hours, the fighting stopped. Not because she won, and not because she lost, but because she began, against everything she'd been, to adapt. She found she could move. Her tail flexed and propelled her across the smooth floor in a single fluid glide, silent and graceful, more elegant than she had ever been on two legs. She rose and turned and coiled, and her body simply knew how, the way it knew how to taste the air and feel the heat of the room. The terror that had ruled her all night cooled into something quieter, an eerie, watchful composure, the stillness of a creature that has all the time in the world. The frantic human need to control everything was loosening its grip. In its place came the serpent's certainty that she did not need to control the world, only to wait and watch and let it come to her.
By the time the city lights began to fade toward dawn, the transformation was complete, and the creature that reared up at the center of Lydia's perfect glass apartment was a naga out of legend. Beautiful, regal, and utterly inhuman. She rose tall on coil after coil of jeweled emerald and gold, her scaled torso draped in the ruins of a designer's blouse, her black hair spilling around a face of cold and serpentine grace, golden eyes surveying the room with the patient stillness of a thing that no longer feared anything in it. The little necklace glowed softly at her throat, its work finally done. The woman who had needed to control everything had been remade into a creature that controlled nothing and feared nothing, that simply was, ancient and cold and waiting. And deep within those golden eyes, growing fainter with every passing minute, the last ember of Lydia looked out at the world she could never rejoin.
As the first gray light crept over the city, the naga that had been Lydia coiled back to the antique box that had started it all, drawn to it somehow, the way she was drawn to warmth. She lifted the box in her clawed hands and, on instinct, peeled back the faded green velvet lining inside. Beneath it lay a hidden compartment, and in the hidden compartment, a small stack of old photographs and notes in a dozen different hands. Women. Photograph after photograph of women, Elegant, beautiful, willful women, each one smiling, each one wearing the emerald serpent necklace at her throat. And on the back of each, a date and a single line: the one who couldn't resist. Lydia's blood ran colder than it already was. She was not the first. She was only the latest. One in a long, long line of women the necklace had chosen and changed and kept. The serpent in the box had been doing this for centuries. Tucked into the bottom of the hidden compartment, beneath the photographs, she found one more thing. A delivery slip, already filled out, waiting. An address she didn't recognize. A name she didn't know. Another woman, somewhere out in the waking city. Elegant, perhaps, and willful, and certain that nothing could ever happen to her that she didn't allow. The one who can't resist. Lydia understood now how the necklace traveled. It did not stay. It moved, from woman to woman, century to century, passed onward by the very creature it had just created. Because the serpent was patient, and the serpent was hungry, and the serpent always needed a new skin to wear. She held the slip in her clawed hand and stared at the stranger's name, and felt two things war inside her: the horror of the woman she'd been, and the cold, coiling temptation of the thing she'd become. Dawn broke gray and gold over the city, and the naga that had been Lydia, coiled by the great window with the antique box resting in her coils, rewrapped now, addressed and ready, the way it had come to her. Somewhere out there, a woman was waking who would receive a beautiful box from no one, and a note that said, "For the one who can't resist," and an emerald serpent she would never be able to take off. Lydia knew she should warn her. She knew the woman she'd been would have screamed a warning. But that woman was very far away now, a fading ember behind two golden eyes, and the cold, patient thing that wore her face only rested its clawed hands on the box and gazed out at the waking world with the calm of something that had all the time in the world. The serpent had a new skin now, and soon, very soon, it would need another. Somewhere, a delivery was already on its way.